Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We are your hosts, Vee and Sean. Yes, Sean Glaze, our guest from episode 66, also known as Lord Spew or Spew. Yes, he worked on Midnight Gospel as a board artist, regular show, Teen Titans Go, and he has his own streaming show, Dueling Drawing Request, which is, would you say, Sean, on a little bit of a hiatus because of Creative Block?
Not because of creative block, but we can go with the narrative that you stole me from away from my interview show. There can be only one.
It was a plan all along. Sean didn't know what he signed up for when he had creative block on Dueling Drawing Request. But
we interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today we have with us Megan Praz. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super stoked to be here on Sean's very first episode hosting. My name's Megan Praz. I am an animator, I am a storyboard artist, and most recently a director.
Woo!
You probably know my work from South Park, Tuca Bertie, Bojack Horseman, and then some other shows that haven't come out yet, and Q-Force, and a show that Vee and I actually worked on together that hopefully will come out at some point.
Yeah, should be in spring on Netflix.
Yes. So, and then I am also in my spare time a comic artist, and that's my other passion.
That is so cool. I love that you have done so many of these shows. You have also done a lot of different positions. Did you start in storyboards?
I did not. I started out as my first really big gig was as an animator on South Park, and when I first got into the industry, I thought that was what I was going to do my whole career, is be an animator, and that was not the case.
That's crazy. That's really interesting that I feel like animating is this, I feel people are like animating's done, but it's not, because there are a lot of animators, especially for prime time, I would say. But I kind of want to ask you a little bit, let's rewind and go to where you went to school, and did you know that you wanted to go into animation, or was it more of a broad idea that you wanted to do art? Or what was kind of that path for you?
Sure. To even go a little further back, I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to be in animation, because I was the kid who was watching cartoons every morning and sitting in front of the TV and trying to draw Roadrunner and Coyote, because I loved the old school Looney Tunes and Chuck Jones, and that was when you couldn't pause the TV to draw the characters. So I would just wait for that half hour of Looney Tunes to come on and as quickly as possible try to draw the characters. And so I knew early on that this is what I want. I want to be an animator. And then for school, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and it turned out there was this kind of not that well known but very good animation school in northwestern Pennsylvania called Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania. And actually, shout out to Edinburgh, because some people from Edinburgh messaged me before this podcast saying, "Hey, I listened to Creative Block." So,
really?
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's so sick.
Shout out to Edinburgh, and that's where I went to school. It's a small state school in Pennsylvania, but we had some really amazing teachers. An old Disney master is one of the teachers there. I could shout out all of my professors. They're all amazing. Shout out to Brad Patullo, who is a really awesome director and stop motion animator, and a lot of great people that I met up there.
That's so cool. I love that. You say it's a state community, yeah.
Not really a community college. Yeah, it's a state school.
Yeah.
Actually, it's now merged into a bigger university called Penn West or something, but I refuse to call it that. It's always going to be Edinburgh to me, and it was great because it's in the snow belt of northwestern Pennsylvania, which means there's literally nothing to do all winter but lock yourself in the studio and draw, because it snows from November till April there, and turns out you can get really good at art and animation if you're just locked in your in the studio and drawing as it snows like 12 feet outside. So yeah.
Was it a little bit of like a generalist animation school? Because I went to U Arts, which is in Philly,
Oh really? Okay.
and it was a very like generalist animation school where you learn like every type of animation. Was it specialized, or was it or did you like get to try a little bit of everything?
I would say it was actually more of a general education than an art school.
Hmm.
So it wasn't just we were taking art classes. I, took world civilizations and astronomy and all of these other kind of interesting classes that I actually kind of enjoyed in addition to animation, but it was general. There wasn't like when I was there wasn't like a straight up storyboarding class. It was like you took traditional animation or
Nice.
you took computer animation, and I was able to do a little bit of both, which both of those skills have served me really well. But back when I was in school, back in my day, we were still doing like pencil tests on paper and shooting everything with a down shooter, and
Mm.
so yeah, I got like a really kind of cool, like old school traditional animation background. Especially, like I said, we had an old Disney master there named Mike Gens who like worked on The Lion King and Hercules, so a really amazing opportunity to learn from someone with that background.
That's
I always love little regional accents and like things that people say that were there any like little phrases that were common around there that like you might not hear other places, like in Philly, instead of like did you eat yet, you say jeet. Jeet
Oh,
yet?
we say that in
Yeah,
we say
jeet.
that in Pittsburgh because
Oh,
I'm
okay,
from
okay,
Western
cool.
Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. So I didn't know that was a Philly thing because I know there's like a pretty big. Are you from Philly originally, or did you just go to school there?
Yeah, from right outside of Philly. Yeah. So do you
Oh
guys
my
did you
gosh.
say yin like yins instead of like we say like in Philly we said
Yeah,
use, like
use.
what are yous doing? Yeah.
Yeah, look at this. My brother from Pennsylvania, from the city of brotherly love. But opposite sides.
Hey,
So we probably have a similar upbringing. I was never enough of a yinzer to say yins unironically, I don't think, but plenty of people I know
that's so funny.
said it and still say it, and every now and then my Pittsburgh accent slips. My wife called me on it the other day. She's like, "Say that word again. What did you say?" And I was like, "Oh man, you can hear
Just like
it."
sweating, like sweat's pouring down your face. Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. So, yep. Yeah, there's yins. Instead of clean up your room, you would say, my grandma used to say, "You're gonna red up your room." Or we run
That's amazing.
we run we what do you use? Okay, if you were to clean the floor in your house, what do you use? What is it called in Philly to clean the floor?
A brum, a
Uh
brum.
okay, but
Like
not that
like
one.
they
The
probably
one you
say
plug
instead
into
of
the
broom,
wall.
they say brum. We'd probably just a vacuum. What we'd
Okay.
say.
See, in Western PA, we call it a sweeper. It's that's another weird regional thing
Oh,
that we call it.
we would probably say a sweeper instead of like a broom, as opposed to like a vacuum.
Oh, okay. No, so you would say, "Did you run the sweeper?"
Man, I love this
Red
stuff.
up
It's
your
so
room
good for it's so good
with the
for
sweeper.
character writing, like
Uh-huh.
knowing like these little teeny things about just how
Yeah,
people talk from different places. It's amazing.
have you
yeah.
studied writing at all a little bit at school? I'm just wondering, since it's like kind of like a larger uh arts major, right? I mean, animation, writing sometimes a little close.
I took a creative writing class, but I wish I had taken more writing stuff because I don't think I got the best writing education growing up in terms of creative writing. It was all like, oh, 5 paragraph essay. In this essay, I
Hmm.
will. So yeah, I wish I'd gotten a little bit more creative writing, but it's something I've kind of picked up over time. And as we get into it more, I have a writing partner who I work with a
Yeah.
lot, and I've been able to learn a lot from her. And so I think when it comes to writing, I'm more of like a story beats type of person who can like look at a story and talk out the beats. And so I think of it from a very like holistic big picture side of things, where I have, when I work with my writing partner, she's usually the person who like really gets into the nitty gritty of like the dialogue.
Hmm.
And you know we work really well together because I think it's also because I didn't take enough creative writing classes, and I probably should, because I'm definitely interested in that side of animation, more of the writing in
Yeah.
addition to the visual storytelling.
And I was gonna to kind of like wrap up that little like chapter on school. How
Sure.
did you look for your first gig? How did you make that jump?
Okay. Well, fun fact, I graduated, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I graduated in 2008, which meant if anyone is aware of what was happening in the US at that time, that was right around the housing collapse and when the entire economy went to shit. And I had this goal of moving to LA, so I graduated. I spent about 6 months at home, like really working on my reel and my portfolio, saving up the money to move to Los Angeles. And I eventually did move to Los Angeles right in 2008. It was right after Barack Obama got elected. And it was a weird time in American history because also Prop 8 had just passed. So it was like this, yay, yeah, we got Obama, but oh, gay people can't get married. Weird. But anyway, I moved to LA and the economy just died. And I watched every single one of my animation friends lose their jobs when I got out here. And I was like, I am fresh out of school. Who is going to hire me when all of these people who have been working for years have suddenly just lost their jobs? So my first couple years in LA, I definitely struggled to find that first gig. Like I was taking freelance work wherever I could get it. I was actually freelancing for some of my buddies back home in Pennsylvania. They have this amazing studio called More Frames Animation, which I highly recommend everyone check it out if you're not following them on Instagram. They do incredible work. So I was doing freelancing from LA for people in Pennsylvania for Pennsylvania money, and it was a rough time for a while before I got that first big animation gig.
Would you say it was in years or in months? Just to kind of like, for people who are listening, because
Yeah.
right now is a weird time as well. So I think that's like
is.
really insightful. It's kind of like timings are a lot. Anyway, they can.
Yeah. It was 2.5 years, I think.
Oh yeah.
After graduating, before I got my like first solid animation gig. Like I had freelance animation gigs. I was getting paid to do art. I did all kinds of strange odd jobs too around LA during that time. That sounds worse than it actually is the way I said that in retrospect, but yeah, it took a while. So I always say like it's not always the best artist that survives, it's the most persistent.
Persistent. Yeah, that's not even the longest time that I've seen
Yeah.
it takes for someone to get work. Like I have friends that are great artists that moved out here, and it took them 3 or 4 years of working in the service industry, doing odd job. Odd jobs don't have to be sus jobs. They can be just different jobs from what you want to be doing out here.
Exactly. Yeah, I did many of them.
Yeah, odd jobs don't have to be sus jobs. I love that. Put that on the shirt.
Do you have what was your story about like the first time that you either got your foot in the door or got noticed, or like how did you bridge that gap in between like I'm doing odd jobs out here, like I don't know, this is hopeless, like whatever, like how am I gonna get a job, and like, oh, like now I'm working in the animation industry.
Yeah, good question. So I was getting a little bit hopeless, and I was drifting a little bit, and this is going to segue into something we'll talk about later. Is that I got really into this weird sport called ultimate frisbee, and I was devoting a lot of my time to that, and I was ready to go to this frisbee tournament in Hawaii. I was like, fuck it all, and that weekend I was like, I had like an epiphany. I was like, you know what? I came to LA to be an artist, and if I want to do that, I need to buckle down and make that my priority. And I remember the last minute I canceled going to this Hawaii tournament. I was like, sorry y'all, I'm dedicating this weekend to working on my career. And I enrolled in a class in Maya. I decided like, I'm going to board my short film finally. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to really try to make it in this industry. And I also applied for a bunch of jobs. And it turns out one of those jobs happened to be for South Park. And
Wow.
I really recognize that as like a turning point of like, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to like focus on my career and I'm really going to do it. And I always say there's this Neil Gaiman quote that he gave in like a commencement speech that says, walk towards the mountain. In the mountain, the top of the mountain being whatever your goal is. And you don't have to go the steepest, straightest path up the mountain. But as long as you're like, as an artist, moving somewhere towards that goal, even if you're taking like little offshoots to the side of the mountain or, as long as you're moving towards it, good things will happen. And that's kind of what it was for me. I was like, I don't know if this short film will end up being anything. But I'm going to work on it and I'm going to do it. And eventually it didn't be anything. But what it ended up doing was giving me skills in Maya, because I was modeling in Maya, I was animating in Maya, and I was storyboarding. And, those skills are things that I took with me. So that when I did try out for the South Park position, I was ready. And so yeah, that to me is a very good example of when you have a career goal, just walk towards the mountain, whatever it is. And I feel like anytime you do your own personal work, it's always led me to other opportunities. It's always opened the door for the next job. Even if I think, oh, I'm not getting paid to do this. This is just something that is my passion. It always leads to the next thing.
I love that. That's such like great insight. And it's also really interesting to hear that you had to take that Maya class after graduating from school and like to kind of keep learning new skills. How did you apply? Where was the job posting? Was it on LinkedIn or like
it was something that I guess it feels like a miracle that I got it to this day, because it's something that never happens. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connections. I applied online, and it was like what do they say that quote is, when opportunity meets preparation, that's what luck is, or something like that. They picked my application out of my professors actually used to joke that they picked her out of 10,000 applications for South Park, but it was more like probably a couple hundred. But still, even then, I felt so lucky, and I knew that if I could at least get into an interview, that I could, be all right. And that happened, and then there's kind of like this long, complicated hiring process for South Park, which I don't think I will go into. But let's just say I kind of won an animation duel to the death.
Whoa, that's
which I know is gonna
You're skipping over the most exciting part of the story. No,
Yeah,
I'm just joking.
more
I'm joking.
questions and answers. But ultimately, yeah, they hired me and to this day, I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity, because it obviously like changed my entire career in the course of my life. I was actually going to go to grad school. I'd gotten into a master's program at USC. I was like, I need to do something. I need more education because I'm not getting jobs. But once I got the South Park gig, I gave up the USC thing, because I'm like, cool, I can either get paid to do animation or I could pay someone else to let me do animation. And luckily I got the opportunity to have a job in the industry. And as I'm sure we'll get into, South Park ended up being a career for quite some time for me.
Yeah, dude.
Getting hired in the animation industry is sort of a Hunger Games gauntlet fight to the death, where everybody's doing tests and like trying to like, oh, I've met this one person one time at a cafe from Twitter, and maybe I'll shoot, an email to them. Yeah, it's just like any little advantage you can get trying to get in.
There's so much, you feel so desperate too, as like just like, someone take me under your wing. Like, and they used to give me this advice in school, like, go show up to a studio, knock on their door, and drop off a demo reel. I'm like, who does that? That's terrible advice.
It's so funny because it worked at a time. I did have a guest back, Von Ross, who's kind of like probably like a generation before us, and he was like, I just pestered the studio until they took me in. And I'm like, now
maybe that does work.
That worked in the days. I feel like now it's like the new era of tests and battle to the death.
Yeah, which is exactly what it was.
That's so crazy. And so how is it, because when you got on South Park, what season was it?
I started on season 15, I believe, which was, I think, they called it Season of the Fan. And actually, if anyone has seen the documentary 6 Days to Air, because it's the Inside South Park process, that was my very first episode. So I feel really lucky that I got to have that like benchmark of like, this is when I started on this show. And I'm in it for like 2 seconds. My butt is in it. It's like my back. So yeah, that was my very first episode. So it's like, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm on this TV show. I made it. I finally have a job in animation. And then I'm like, oh God. The very first episode's the human centipede. You don't really have to watch, Mom and Dad. It's okay. Like, you can sit this one out.
That episode was crazy. Oh my God. It's crazy that there's this show that like everybody remembers. Everybody was talking about it all the time. That's so insane. Like, I mean, it's cool that you mentioned the 6 Days to Air, because I watched that documentary. It's great. Everybody should watch it. But also, it's mostly from the writer's perspective or from like the EP perspective. And so I'd love to kind of hear for you kind of like the day-to-day, how was that like? How was like, were you, I don't know, let me know if any of those questions are crazy, but were you sleeping at the studio? Were you like, how was that?
Well, they're right about the 6 days to air process. From the animation side of things, it's a little different because while they are feverishly writing and or procrastinating on their writing, as an artist, as an animator, you're the last in the pipeline, so you're often waiting for scripts to come down and boards, and sometimes depending on how complex the scene is that they've written, sometimes the TDs can get it to you in an hour. Other times the scenes and the setups take a full day or more to get it to you, like. And yeah, so it kind of ramps up in intensity when you come in on a Thursday or a Friday. The show used to air. I think the process is different now because, this is actually a relic from the past because post-pandemic, I think they make the show a little bit differently. But Friday is kind of chill. Saturday gets a little less chill. By Sunday, you're working extremely long hours. Monday, it feels like everything is on fire. And then Tuesday, you are just working basically it's like in the documentary, like you working like a 24-hour day in this mad dash to get this show on the air. And it is, you pull an all-nighter on Tuesdays, and that's one thing I can talk a lot about is how to successfully pull an all-nighter, because I've done a few of them.
So what's your trick? Because I've never pulled an actual all-nighter in my life. I can't do it.
Really? Okay.
Like an actual one.
I'm an all-nighter person. I'm
Sean?
also, yes, I am. Yeah.
I have to have at least 1 hour
tips,
sleep,
tips,
like one or
tips.
two. So like you guys go all-nighter tips.
Now, the question one, do you
Yes.
think a 1 hour nap negates the title of all-nighter? I'm just curious. Do you think napping ruins in the same way that if you're vegan, if you have that one little sip of milk, like it just ruins the whole year of veganism? Like,
all right. Lose my vegan powers, Scott Pilgrim style, by taking that sip of half and half. Yes. I am not here to gatekeep all-nighters, but what I will say,
they can have them.
Yeah, they can. But what I will say is, if you work till past midnight till 1 a.m. and you call that an all-nighter, that is bullshit. That is not an all-nighter. I feel like for it to be an all-nighter, you have to see the sun come up the next morning. That is my only requirement. I'm not gonna be a hard ass about napping. Do what you gotta do to get through it. But I remember when I first started at South Park, and I remember my very first all-nighter, and there was a moment, it's like 6 or 7 in the morning, and I went to the bathroom, and I am like huddled on the toilet, shaking in like a fetal position, like, how do people do this? How are they still working? I'm like, these people are not human. How do you do this job? How do you work all night? And I'm like, I could barely do this once, and then I proceeded to do it 97 more times after that. So you find ways, but at first it is hard to pull an all-nighter if you're not used to it. But the strategy, so I would love to hear your strategy, Sean, but like for me over time it was like I'm not a caffeine drinker generally, so I would save my caffeine reserves until Tuesdays, and that's when I would drink my caffeine. I would usually hit it for the first time like around 9 or 10 p.m. that night. And another strategy for me is to make sure you like walk around a little bit, eat constantly, but like not a lot, not so much that your stomach is full and it's going to make you fall asleep. Like really pace yourself, because we would get meals brought in at like 2 a.m, so I would always eat during, or like have a snack throughout the night, drink a lot of water, and then like also know your body's limitations. Like I would know generally that between like the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. was when I would slow down, because that's when my body would be like, I want to go to sleep. And then you like hit this fugue state at like 3 or 4 a.m. and you just work through, and you're like, oh my God, it's 8 a.m. It's 9 a.m. How did this happen? So it's like really knowing your body and really pacing yourself, knowing when you have to go hard on a shot versus, oh, this is my time to rest while I'm waiting for the next shot to come to me. And I could go into the process a lot as well, as like knowing what the shot needs to be. Is this the money shot that needs to like be, you need to nail it? Or is this the kind of shot that you could just get done, get it through, get it to the editor, get it in front of the director's eyes, and then move on to the next thing?
I think what's really interesting is that you mentioned that you're always in this process of like stop, go. Like, how how long would you wait between shots, and like what's the shortest you waited and the longest you waited approximately?
Yeah, it was different every single episode. You just had to be ready for literally anything. You never know what to expect. Like, you could have chilled talking headshots all night, or you could have a situation where at like 4 a.m, like, okay, new script came down. We have 20 children being chased out of school by like Randy dressed as like Gangnam Style, and he has to walk this way, and you need to, and like it has to, like you never knew what you were gonna get on that show late at night, and oh man, like sometimes it just breaks you. I'm like, okay, I have to do this scene with all these people driving around in 3D cars on cocaine at 4 a.m, and like you just want to cry. It's like, how am I gonna get this done? This needs to be on the air in like less than 12 hours.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
So
that's insane.
Yeah.
So as far as all-nighters go,
Yeah.
I tend to
Yeah.
it's generally a bad idea, but I tend to thrive and work the best if I am working in spurts of motivation. And so
Yeah.
as opposed to relying strictly on when I have motivation, I try to induce moments where I'm more likely to be motivated. So it does cause it's sort of like how a hippo sprints. Like it does it like over like short periods of time, but it's like it's really intense and it kills people. So um so, so what that usually means is that there are periods of time where I'll work for like 16 hours or something like that,
Yeah.
or I think for me a big part of doing all-nighters is if you get to 5 or 6 in the morning and you are still doing um writing and creative stuff that's high brain power required, you've made a mistake. I think that as much as you can, especially if you're like if you're storyboarding or writing something, you have to get that done earlier by like 1 or 2, and then hope that essentially you're conditioning your body to be at least medium good at drawing, even if you're not thinking about it or have enough sleep. So that's sort of like
I
like
see.
your fumes are still pretty good. Like you draw still
Yeah.
pretty well on fumes. And so yeah, but by the time, like 10 o'clock in the morning runs around, you are um you're cleaning up drawings. You're not like conceptualizing drawings. And so I mean this is different from
Right.
what you were working on, because like you might have to start a shot at like whatever 3 in the morning. So it is a little bit different, but mine comes from like, oh, I got an idea at 11 o'clock at night for a short and I need to make it. I do have work in the morning. I'm just going to stay up all night and make this, and tomorrow is fucked a little bit. But like I need to like
Yeah.
I'll just be like, I need to make this little short for me to be happy, and then I would do an all-nighter.
Yeah, no, it's a little different process because I can't speak from the writer's side of things, but I do know that ideally they're not writing brand new script, like you said, and using those creative muscles like late at night. It's not to say it didn't happen, but yeah, I get that, and it kind of to answer V's question because I realized I didn't fully answer it. It's like sometimes you are waiting for hours, like you have like a 2 hour gap, and you just
Wow.
have to like chill out, and you have to like
That's-
just relax, and it's almost like being a relief pitcher in baseball. I don't know if you all are sports people, but like knowing that like you're chilling in the dugout 1 minute just thinking like you're just spitting sunflower seeds on your teammate, and then the next second it's like, oh, it's bottom of the ninth, I gotta go in and pitch to the best hitter on the Astros and somehow win this game, like. And that's kind of the vibe. You need to be able to just turn it off and on. Like, there are times where I've worked straight through, like, you get in at 10 a.m. and I work until 7:30 the next morning, and I take breaks only to eat and go to the bathroom. And then there's other nights where it's like, you're chilling, you're waiting for that scene for a couple hours. Oh, then it comes in and it's chill. And then, oh no, everything's on fire again. And you have to, like, they rewrote something and you're re-lip syncing a bunch of scenes. And it's just like this mad dash to finish. But, yeah, it was a very, very unique time. in my life, and I feel very, very fortunate that I got to be part of such an interesting creative process for so many years.
Because it's the only place that does it that way. So it's
Yeah.
so interesting. And so when you're like doing that final sprint before it airs, like what does the next day look like? Is everybody going home? Is everybody just sleeping in the studio? Like what, like paint a picture of that.
Though there are times when, you know, like there are some jobs that finish up earlier than animation. Like I said, we're kind of the last line of defense. So the TDs would often finish up, technical directors would often finish up a little bit earlier. So there are nights where you'd hear snoring come from another cubicle, like their job is done. Then, you know, when the episode is done, when it's like kind of in the bag, your supervisor comes around and tells you, okay, you can go home, you're cut, you know, go home. And there are people, I was lucky because I always lived close to the studio, but there are people that then, after having worked all day, would have to drive home like an hour in LA morning traffic at like 9 and 10 in the morning, and I never envied that. There were some people that would, if they had that long drive, like they would maybe sleep at the studio for a little while. But the recovery process is a whole thing as well, like, because not only do you do that once, but you have to then amp yourself up and know that you're going to have to do the exact same thing next week. So that aftercare of Wednesday is extremely important. And for me, it was like always have a ritual. Like I'd go home, I'd try to sleep, but not let myself sleep past like 3 or like 4 p.m. at the absolute latest, because you want to get back on your normal sleep schedule. So I would sleep till like 2 p.m. I would often like get a massage. That was like my aftercare for myself, is because you're sitting for so long and your shoulders are tight and you're so stiff from being in such an intense production mode that, like, you know, I felt like a pro athlete, like an NFL player who after the big game like had to do all this body treatment the day after pulling an all-nighter, and then like I would get myself a very indulgent dinner, and then you try to just like get back on your normal sleep schedule. And being in production, or being we used to call it the run of South Park, was always really intense, and everyone has their own coping mechanisms on how to get through it. But it is very, very intense. And again, like I said, I'm thankful that I got to be a part of that part of television history, because like you said, Vee, there's nothing else in the industry like it. It's
crazy. Oh, wow. And wait, so how often were you home?
Not very often. Like the spouses of everybody would be like, oh, we need like a South Park support group because we don't see our significant others for however long the run was, a couple months at a time. You know, like you get home so late at night from work that you barely see your partner, and they usually get up and leave for work the next morning before. Again, this is all pre-pandemic, so I think it's a little different now, but yeah, it's tough on your relationships, and you don't really have a life during those couple months. And yeah, it's challenging. That's all I can say, but you're in it together. And that's why sometimes I'll make a larger point about animation, is it's important to, when you're hiring or you have a crew of people that actually like each other and can get along. Sometimes that's more important than being the most talented person. Is like, can you stand to be around this person for an all-nighter? And you know, yeah, that's kind of an important part of it, I think.
Yeah, that's such a good point, especially for something that's like so intense like that. I'm guessing you met your partner before South Park, right?
just before, yes. Which was kind of nice because I was a starving artist when I met her, and then my career took off. So, yeah, kind of cool.
Oh, wow. So how long did you stay on the show?
I was there for 9 years. I think season 23 was my last season at South Park.
9 years.
Yeah.
Now, but before we go into this next part of your life, I have been told that you have an interesting battle station set up currently right now because you are traveling, and I kind of wanted to draw your current situation just so that the audience gets a little bit of a visual representation.
Yeah, I have my computer. This is kind of a last minute thing to be on this podcast. So my proper computer setup is at my house in Joshua Tree. And I am currently in a friend's bedroom. So to paint the picture, I'm borrowing Vee's Surface Pro. Unfortunately, we don't have the pen, so I'm not able to draw. I'm drawing the old-fashioned way in a spiral notebook. And there's like a mortar and pesto thing to weigh down a laundry basket, which is flipped upside down on this bed. And then the laptop is on top of that, and the microphone is on like a tripod posted there. And I am sitting crisscross applesauce on my friend's bed, sinking into the softness of it while we're doing this podcast. And I feel like the whole thing will collapse if I even so much as click something incorrectly. So it's a very precarious situation here right now.
It's a testament to Creative Block being a lo-fi podcast.
Yes. The
People,
whole setup is on a creative block that this is this laundry basket. Yeah, it's about to topple any second.
So we have this little laundry basket, and on top of the laundry basket, we have a Surface Pro. We have a microphone with a little pop filter, right?
Yeah, it's got the pop filter, as you can see in the Zoom call.
yeah, for anyone who's like listening on Spotify or iTunes right now, make sure you check out the YouTube video where Sean is drawing Megan's setup. So it's pretty awesome. I'm so glad that you're like, let's do this.
Yeah.
At the last one, it's so like, I love that it's like you sound like you're this like traveler, just like globetrotter, just like always on the go.
I am. I'll give you a couple other details to add. I have a cup of coffee, and also Jackie has this big, long, thick pillow that looks like a boa constrictor on this bed that like just maybe I'm like coiled up in it. It's like this really ridiculously long pillow. So that's a fun detail that you can add. It's gigantic.
Oh my gosh, I love that. While we have Sean drawing Megan's setup, I am gonna start the next chapter of your life. Were you kind of like, how did you decide to jump to another show? Because you could have been on South Park forever, right?
I could have.
Yeah.
By that point in time, I'd been on the show 9 seasons, and yes, I could have been on the show forever, but there are a lot of reasons that I left South Park. But the one catalyst that I can truly think of is that, so I was doing comics in my spare time, and I liked South Park for the satire and all that stuff, but I had higher aspirations, like, you know, and I didn't know exactly what those were, but I had them. And this was around the Me Too era of like, I guess it was right around 2016, 2017. And if you know the comedian Emily Heller, so she's awesome. And she started doing this event called Retirement Party for Men, which it was like we're sick of men in the industry doing awful shit and getting away from it. What would happen if we had this party that all of these amazing, talented, creative women in the industry would go to and network at? And just by luck, it's its whole own story. I got invited to this kind of
Oh, hell yeah.
exclusive party through my friend Nicole, who also worked at South Park. And I went to it, and it was this big networking event, and it was all these like really amazing, cool, powerful women in the industry, and I got introduced to someone by the name of Amy Winfrey. I don't know if y'all know Amy or are familiar with her amazing cartoons. And she at the time was a director on Bojack Horseman. And as I was talking to her, it turns out she and her husband Pete both had worked on South Park back in the day. And I started talking to her. And I was like, holy shit, that's what I do. That's what I do right now. And then she told me she was a director on this show. And I was like, it was the first time in my mind it clicked. It was that like, if you can see it, you can be it moment. Of, oh, here's this cool woman. And she seemed so soft-spoken and chill, which is very different from the kind of leadership that I was accustomed to. Like, oh, you could be this kind of person and be a leader. Oh, interesting. And it was the first time I saw a pathway for myself. And then I had an interesting relation to Bojack Horseman at the time, because I think even the creators of the show have kind of famously said that the first couple episodes of the show are not really representative of what the whole show ended up being. So I was one of those people that when it first came out, I was ready for it. I watched it, and I watched the first couple episodes, and I got to the episode where like Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack are like fighting over Diane and like the D in Hollywood, and I was just like, fuck this toxic bullshit. I am out. I'm not watching another show where two dudes fight over a woman and like she's like the prize. And I was out. And you know, as we all know, Bojack becomes this incredible, amazing, deep show not long after that. But and everyone would tell me like, you know, watching Bojack? I'm like, nah, it's just not for me. Why are you guys watching this show? It doesn't seem that good. And had I discovered that sooner, who knows? I might have worked on Bojack sooner. But after meeting Amy, and I also met Ann Walker there, who was directing on Bojack, and after meeting the two of them, I was like, oh, these people work on the show. I got to give it a second look. And that night I went home and I watched like so many episodes of Bojack, and my wife and I just got super into it, and I fucking fell in love with this show. I was like, how do I work on the show? And then another interesting thing happened at that retirement party for men. It was that I met Lisa Hannawalt, and again, I am not a super fan of Bojack at this point. I didn't know much about it. I was just like, okay, cool, you're the woman who does designs on it. So I just like, I didn't have like a sense of awe yet for how incredible she was. But I chatted her up a little bit, and I was talking to her, and I think we got to asking each other like what our dream projects would be. And I was saying that like, I would love it if there was like a Broad City, because I love the show Broad City, but like in animation for women. And it was so funny because at the time she was already working on Tuca and Bertie, and she was like, well, I have this show. And I was like, no way. It was so weird that like we had that conversation, and you'd think that the storyboard ending of this would be like, hey, I'm working on this show, you should work for me, come get a job. But the path is never that simple, right? It's not like you go to a networking event, and even though I'm like, you're making exactly what I want to be working on, the path to Bojack was actually a lot longer than that. But I left that meeting being super fucking inspired. And a couple months later, I'd heard about they were doing storyboard tests for Tuca and Bertie. And by the way, am I talking too much, or is this interesting?
No, this is super great. I love this. Great. This is awesome.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay. So they were doing tests for Tuca and Bertie, and the test for Tuca and Bertie was actually a Bojack test. And I did the test. I did all right at it. And I got an email back from them saying, hey, we really liked your test, but we don't have a spot for you on Tuca and Bertie at this time, and, you know, we'll keep you in mind for future stuff. And I thought, great, like, that, I know what that means. That means I'm never going to hear from them again. And it was actually the right decision for them at the time, because I don't think I was at a point in my career where I was ready to work on a show like Tuca and Bertie, so they made the right decision, believe it or not, at that point. And a couple months later, though, they were like, hey, remember us? Well, because all the crew from Bojack had moved on to Tuca and Bertie, they were like, yeah, we're starting Bojack back up again, and we need more artists. And they asked me if I wanted to be on Bojack. And that was less than a couple years, and I went in for the interview. It went great. I met Mike Hollingsworth and Sean Gilroy, both amazing people. Eric Bleiler was the producer as well, and he actually remembered me. I'd interned for Shadow Machine many years prior on like stop motion stuff, so that was kind of a cool reconnect. But they hired me, and so during my off season of South Park, I worked on season 6 of Bojack Horseman, and lo and behold, my very first day walking in, I find out I'm on Team 2, and my director is Amy Winfrey, and
What?
I was just like, oh my god, mind blown. I can't believe like 6 months later or whatever, I am here, I am working for you. I get to work for this woman who I admire so much, and because I mean, at that time I watched every single episode she had directed and was just in awe of everything that she had done. And I'm like, cool, I just hope I don't disappoint you.
That's so crazy. So you said that you were doing this during your off season, but did that mean that you wanted to go back on South Park, or were you just kind of like worried, like kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, or like kind of what was the...
Well, that's another interesting thing, right? Like, so I wasn't ready to leave South Park because I didn't know if I'd be a good storyboard artist. This is my first storyboard gig. I've been an animator my whole life. Like, what if I suck at this? Or what if I don't like it? Or, you know, the South Park money and schedule's pretty good, you know? Like, do I want to leave that?
One thing I wanted to ask about when you were getting onto these shows and retroactively looking back, you said like the first time around you took a test and it didn't work out. There's a lot of people that probably listen to the podcast that are in that same position taking tests, and maybe they don't understand why they got on. Looking back at it, Is there anything that you think that you did wrong, or any advice that you can give to past you who did that test and maybe you know now how you could have aced it?
No, because I actually think I did the best I could have for my ability at that time. And I think it was true to what my skill set was. And I think they made the right decision for not bringing me on to
Nice.
Tuca and Bertie, which I can get into why when we talk about the difference between the styles of Bojack and Tuca. But I wasn't ready for a show that was like, I'd been an animator at a desk for all those years, like not drawing as much as I should have. I wasn't ready for like the free flowing style of Tuca and Bertie yet. To be completely honest, I would get there later. And so I don't have any regrets on that test. I feel like I set the file up well and they made the right call by not hiring me for Tuca that time. I got on Bojack, I learned the system, I learned the studio. That was a show that I was extremely well suited for coming from animation because it is so acting heavy. It was, you know, it was very puppeted. The storyboards themselves, they had to be very tight, and coming from South Park, I really understood well how Flash worked and how to like build kind of like a quote unquote rig. And I was good at timing and I was good at acting, but my drawing wasn't there yet to be, I think, good enough to be on Tuca. So I have no regrets about that. I think everyone all around made the right decision. And then, as we would see a couple years later, I would get onto Tuca and Bertie, and by that time I was ready and I was so stoked to be on a show like that.
I think that's like a really great point you're making, because I feel like it's better to not get on a job that you're not a good fit for than accidentally get on a job that you're not a good fit for. Because then it really, I don't know if you've ever experienced that yourself, but for myself, it has happened in my career where like I got hired and I wasn't the right fit. And then you're just kind of like, well, this sucks. Like, do I suck? Am I like a terrible artist? Like, what is going on? And you have like this kind of like cognitive dissonance between like your actual skill set and what's happening.
Yeah.
So I do feel like this is like a really mature and great answer to that question, because it's like,
yeah,
it's better to not be hired on a show you're not the right fit for at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Ah!
Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say, yeah, for people listening who might not understand this, just to peel the curtain back a little bit, each show that you're working on as a storyboard artist, they have different expectations for the boards. There's certain shows where, there's certain shows where you're building the radio play. There's certain shows where you're timing things. There's certain shows where you go into the show and they have pre-made puppets and rigs that you can drop into the files, and you're like redrawing facial expressions and moving around the parts. And then there's some shows where you're drawing everything and you're doing dynamic acting and action, and like every show is going to be different. And it is, like you said, it's helpful to get onto a show that that best suits where you're at, unless there's a period of time on a show where you have an opportunity to learn. And that's also great, right? Like sometimes there's a show where they're like, we know you can get there, we're gonna help you get there and give you a chance.
Right. And the reason I want to say yes and no is because I don't want anyone to take away from this that like, oh, if you don't think you're qualified for something, you're not ready for something, don't sell yourself short. Like, because sometimes being on a show that you're not ready for and getting thrown into the fire and having to adapt, like that's what happened to me on South Park when I started. It was not easy. It was so hard to like jump into that intense of a production schedule, and you adapt and you surprise yourself. And I went from being who I think I was the worst animator on that show my first 2 years to I think being one of the people who got some of the toughest shots on the show and could be right in there with everybody else. And so I'm really proud of the fact that that's like, give yourself room to grow. And I could say the same with Bojack. Like, I started out and I went from that point where I was such a green storyboard artist and to assistant directing on Tuca and Bertie, and eventually directing on another show. So, give yourself room to grow, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself in a job that you think, there's a difference between something that's going to be challenging and something that is truly, like Vee said, not a good fit. So never sell yourself short, and especially because women tend to do that. They tend to think, oh, they tend to shortchange themselves. So I want to really emphasize that don't ever sell yourself short if
I think that's very true. Yeah. What you just said, especially for women tending to like be like, oh, if I'm not there yet, I shouldn't even apply. It's like,
Right.
no, fuck this. Apply to the job.
Exactly. Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there. It's the only way you're gonna learn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. Yeah. How was it?
Yeah.
What would you say? So did you, when you started on Bojack, were you like, okay, I got this and now I'm done with South Park? Or did you go back to South Park for a little bit? Did you do a little devil dipping for a while?
I did go back to South Park for a little bit because a weird thing happened while I was in my season 6 of Bojack, was that everyone was getting ready to roll back onto season 2 of Tuca and Bertie, and that was like our whole hope. And I was like, when season 2 happens, I think I'm finally going to be ready. I'm going to pull the plug on South Park and give up this stable career I've had for 9 years and jump onto Tuca and Bertie, and I'm going to be ready. And I'll never forget the day that we were working on Bojack, and so I was talking to Chris Nance about something, and suddenly everybody, it sounded like a pin could drop in the studio, and it sounded like, I was like, did someone die? What the heck? And that was the day we had found out that Tuca and Bertie had gotten canceled for the first time. And the level of devastation in the studio, because everyone loved that show so much, and there was so much heart that we put into it, and suddenly I was like, well, I guess that made my decision easier. I'm going back to South Park because I'm not just going to roll on to Tuca and Bertie. And it was a really big bummer. We were all pretty sad because, again, we just relived that for a second time because it got canceled again. And one thing I'll say about working on the Raphael Bob Waksberg and Lisa Hannawalt productions is that everyone really, really believes in those shows and loves to work on them. And we all felt so strongly about both Bojack and Tuca, and it's a really good thing, I think, for a writer or a showrunner if your crew really, really likes it, really cares about your show and wants to work on it. So yeah, that was my long way of saying I did end up going back to South Park for one more season. And, again, I could talk to you about this for a really long time, but, then the world kind of blew apart and there was COVID and all that stuff. And eventually I did leave South Park, and that's the whole thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so crazy. Oh, man. Yeah. Shows getting canceled is, it's crazy, especially for Tuca and Bertie getting canceled like twice, because it was on Netflix first for people who don't know. And then it was on Adult Swim. And then, boy. Oh,
yeah. I got to work on the last season of Bojack, though, which I was extremely proud of and honored to be a part of.
That's awesome.
That is such a fucking awesome season. That it's so good. I remember
it's so satisfying to end cap it too.
Not very many shows get to like end a show on their terms, or at least most of their terms. So it's really cool that Bojack got to give itself a good ending.
Yeah. Wow, dude. When you think about it, do you ever think about like how cool it is that you worked on like these like fucking like high profile shows? Like it's 3 fucking cool shows when you think about it, right?
I'm extremely honored to get to work on such a big part of animation history and just put a small mark on it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And how do you, okay, so we talked a little bit earlier in the episode that you do comics. Have you kind of been balancing making comics in your free time and working in animation? Because it
started out like kind of just like I wanted to do it. I always had a love of comics. That was what I was drawing in like high school. I was always drawing cartoons and comics of like my teachers and writing my own little stories. So that was always a thing I did in my spare time. And one of the things that I think can be really creatively fulfilling is when you're working on a show and you're always executing someone else's vision, it can kind of drain you creatively. And I think it's really important as an artist to always kind of have your own thing going. So like whenever the industry does not go your way, or you're on a project that you don't like working on, or there's a lot of like negativity out there right now in the industry with so many shows having been canceled. Like the thing that I can always fall back on is I'm doing my own thing. I've got my own thing going. So comics have kind of always been that for me. And while I was working on South Park, it was kind of my way of keeping my drawing skills a little bit more fresh, because I knew I eventually wanted to like maybe move on to something bigger, whether it be my own project or storyboard. So, when you're just animating in a computer all day, that was my way of like, oh, I'm going to draw in my spare time and like be kind of okay at this if and when I want to transition to boards. And Yeah, so I did like a webcomic for Autostraddle for a while, if anyone's familiar with that entertainment website. And then I got into like drawing the frisbee comics shortly after that, and which led me to a personal project that I'm working on now.
Is that something that's still under wraps, or can you talk about your personal
I
project that
would
you're working
love
on now?
to. So I'm working on a graphic novel with my longtime writing partner, Megan Praz, and we kind of started out by doing a short like web comic called Contested Strip. It's a very funny ultimate frisbee pun if you are familiar with the sport, which you're probably not. And but we wanted to do, we were doing like kind of short one-off things that only people who play ultimate would understand. It was very like kind of insider comic, but we wanted to take that and turn it into like a bigger narrative story. So we wrote this long graphic novel that just started out as kind of an idea and then turned into like a 200-page epic graphic novel. And it's kind of this thing a la the Mighty Ducks or Ted Lasso or Moneyball, where you don't have to actually play the sport to enjoy it. Like, you don't have to know about the ins and outs of hockey to enjoy the Mighty Ducks. It's a pure like sports comedy ragtag team of underdogs who try to win a national championship, and there are all these fun characters and ridiculous things that happen throughout the comic as they're on their route to winning a national championship. There's drama, there's intra-team relationships, there's heartbreak, there's romance, there's all kinds of stuff that happens. So it's a project we've been working on for about 4 years, and yeah, we're hoping to finish it this year. We want to get it published. We're really proud of
Wow.
it. It's over 200
That's so
pages.
cool.
I'm really, really, really stoked on it, and been working on it for a long time. And it's 4 years in, and I'm still into it. I'm still like, this is the thing I want to be working on in my spare time, which is kind of cool.
That is awesome. I feel like a lot of people struggle with that, like
Yeah.
sticking to a project. Do you feel like having a writing partner also helps because you can keep like psych each other up about
Exactly. Like, our whole MO with this comic, if nothing ever comes of it, if like the world blows up tomorrow, I could still say that like I had such a fun time writing it with my writing partner. And it's the other thing is, it like feeds back into my own career. Is like, when we're talking about story and plot and planting and payoff and foreshadowing and all of these things, these are all things that work in my animation career, all things that like help me become a better storyteller, whether it be boarding a scene or directing. And we've had some really amazing artists that we've hired to help us with the colors and some of the other line work. So that's made maybe I've had to suddenly go from being a person who, this is exactly what I want, I know how to draw it, to, oh, I need to be a really good communicator because I need to be able to communicate what I want to this other person who's helping out. And I think all of that side project stuff that you end up doing makes you a better at your career. Like, it made me a better director to be able to have the language to say, oh, this is how I communicate with this person to tell them what this scene needs to be and what the feeling that we're going for here. And like you said, like, feeding off of another person's creativity is great. Like, I don't think I would do this if it was just me. I'm not motivated enough on my own, but like, just Ro and I, or Megan, the other Megan, making each other laugh is like my constant motivation in this project. This is like, we just love cracking each other up, and it's very, very special to have that kind of creative relationship with somebody.
Do you feel like making sure that you're working on your own personal projects throughout all this time, do you feel like it's contributed towards when you storyboard inserting yourself just a little bit more into the work rather than like there's one way of approaching a storyboard or something where you are doing exactly what you think the safest thing to do for that scene would be versus like how would I do this as a
Mm.
like a personal creative? Like has that had any effects on your your taste or your vision or execution on boards?
I think for me, boards, because you are working for someone else, it's really understanding what the writer wants, what the intention is. So, like, it's really trying to get into the showrunner's head. And if you have a showrunner that you, like, really, really agree with, I think that could be, like, what they're trying to do, and you see what they do. Like, you can bring your own
Sure.
personal experience into it, but it's ultimately, like, how do I execute this vision? And if I could give an example from Bojack, actually, would that be cool? Because I
Yes.
Of
cannot
course.
stress enough how much I admired the writers of Bojack Horseman, and especially Raphael as the showrunner. Like, how much empathy and emotional depth he would bring to characters and the storylines in that show. And probably, I would go as far to say the greatest honor of my career was to get to work on, if you're familiar with the penultimate episode of Bojack Horseman, The View from Halfway Down. It's like that epic dinner party one.
Yeah.
And I got to do,
Mhm.
Amy Winfrey directed that. Again, amazing director, so
Wow.
brilliant. I'm so lucky I got to work with her. But she entrusted me with doing the secretariat bits on that episode. And that was a character that, you know, it's really dark. He did the poem, the title of the episode, The View from Halfway Down, where he does this really, really intense poetry reading about jumping off of a bridge, I think. And so talking about bringing your own personal experiences, like, to get into that scene, I had to go into a super dark place, because I did the thumbnails on it. I can't say that I did the cleans on it, but I thumbnailed it. And you know, like, you bring the dark, you have to go to the depths of your own life and the darkest parts of your own life. And I remember driving to the studio on the days that I would work on that scene, and I would put like Jumpers on by Sleater Kinney, which is like a song about jumping off of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I would just try, like, you live in that mindset when you're a board artist, and you live in that for a couple of days, and you feel the importance of that scene too. Like, again, like, we all, when we worked on Bojack, we believed in it so much, and I knew how emotionally deep that scene was and how important it was going to be to people. And I think it was Alison Toffel, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, who wrote that episode. And yeah, like, so bringing a part of yourself and like into that performance and putting yourself, like, grabbing the depths of who you are and the darker parts of your own story and putting it into that character to like serve the scene. I was so, like, I felt so lucky that I got to work on that, and I think that scene really resonated with a lot of people, and I loved that episode of television. So, like, yes, you bring yourself to it, but, you know, like, you're ultimately serving the creator's vision, and I'd work on anything that Raphael or Lisa made for that reason, because I love, like, the emotional depth they brought to everything that they, and how thoughtful they were about all the characters. And yeah, be a showrunner that artists want to work for. You know, write good stuff.
That
Yeah.
gave me
It's so
chills. That was crazy.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
dude, it's so rare that that on a show. I mean, like, we work on so many shows that are like, it's goofy
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
rarely, or things taken very seriously, and like, you're lucky to have been able to work on an episode that you know that the audience is gonna feel something,
Yeah.
or you hope that they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, a lot of the time when you're watching cartoons, no one feels anything except for like laughing,
Right.
and that's great. But like, I've only had one experience like that when
Yeah.
I was working on the Midnight Gospel. There's an
Yeah.
episode where Duncan Trussell
Mm-hmm.
it's literally a conversation with his mom who's going to die, and in the
Oh.
episode the first scene I had to storyboard in that last episode was him burying his mom and that mushroom
Mhm.
growing out of her. And my storyboard partner next to me was storyboarding like funny bears and like pitching like little bear jokes, like the little bear doctors running around who are like doing cute stuff. And I'm like, you get to do that? and like, the very first scene I'm working on this episode, like it's someone like sobbing, and like
Yeah.
a really emotional moment that really is an important part of the series. And I was like, okay, all right, so I guess today I'm gonna be sad. Today I gotta get into that mode, like,
Right.
I gotta act, you know.
Yeah.
And yes, some of those scenes in that episode make people cry, and
Yeah.
it makes that series more important to me that I worked on it too.
Right.
So
And I think what's sometimes hard for viewers to understand is that, like, a scene like that can pass by in a couple minutes, right? Or a couple seconds or whatever. But when you're the artist boarding that kind of stuff, you're living in it for days sometimes. Those deep, dark emotions, like,
slow
Yeah.
motion,
whether even if it's
living like a
Yeah.
starfish.
yeah, like, you are so in it.
Just slow motion, living like the starfish, like yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real. That's really what it is. You're just like, because it takes so long. It takes so long to draw all of it. And oh my God, that's crazy. And being in that mindset for, yeah, slow motion is the right definition of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
you dig into the feelings, right? Like, I don't think it works to be disconnected from it. I think it's really important to, like, live it and be in it within reason of, you know, taking care of yourself. But like you come home from work that day and you're like in a sad, upset mood, and your partner's like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "I actually had a great day. I'm just still in this scene." So and then in contrast to that, so I'm like, I was very proud of that scene on BoJack. And then on South Park, I'm like, well, but then there's also the pride that came from like animating Tom Brady shitting himself. So there's the opposite ends of the spectrum of like, oh, here's this silly, stupid sports thing that makes me laugh, and I'm so proud to say I got to do that. But then also then there's like the depth of a character dealing with suicide and the regret of it, that, you know, in the penultimate episode of this epic Bojack Horseman story.
Dude,
Yeah.
wow. So good. About your comic, about your ultimate comic. And like, are you publishing it anywhere online, or is it just like in your computer vault?
It is in the computer vault, but we do have snippets of it on Instagram. We are at Contested Strip. You can also find that through my own personal handle at Megan Praz. But yeah, it's on at Contested Strip. We have a couple, like we have the first scene of the comic on Instagram, and we're still kind of figuring out our plan for release. Like Vee, you and I have talked about this before, but like the idea of like making, in a world where everything is digital, like an idea of like making a book that people can hold is so important to me, and like having like a physical record is something I've made. And so that is our MO, and I'm sure we'll do some sort of online release eventually, but right now it's still like kind of in the vault. The first scene exists, and it's so hard to draw a comic and then also keep up with the social media aspect of it. I need to be better about that. I've never really you know, tried to make my social media presence be as big as it could or should be. So, hey, hello new followers. Maybe we'll pick up some followers from this, but we're gonna
dude. And I was just gonna say, but it's a testament though that you don't have to have a big following to work in animation, because sometimes people can get a little hooked up on that. But anyway,
have a very
like
small following. I get like 1 or 2 likes on my tweets. V's here like got like 8,000 likes. I'm like, I tweet something that I think is profound, and it's like 1 like. I'm like, cool. It's not gonna stop me from putting my opinion out there. But yeah, maybe there's a purity in that. I don't know.
Dude.
Yeah.
Dude, I will tweet something that I feel like is brilliant, or I will draw something that is meaningful, and it'll get like, no one will look at it, but if I tweet out it's like a fart joke, or like something so stupid, it's like the stupidest meme I've ever drawn in like 1 second, like that's what ends up that's what people end up seeing, and I'm like, okay, great. Cool.
It's a testament to being prolific and being persistent.
I think it's just like the internet works better with silly. I think if you want to be deep and meaningful, books are better. I do feel like there is a form, because when you're on the internet, you're you know, when you like turn on your phone, you're not thinking to yourself like, I'm really up for some deep thinking today. You're just, you know, you're like, let me distract myself for 3 seconds. So it's tough. It's tough, but I don't know. It's interesting. These are like interesting things, like different worlds to think of, right? Yeah. Oh man.
I want to hear about when so you're making this Ultimate Frisbee comic. Do you have any stories of things that happened in real life that you use as, you know, fuel for the things that you write, and how do you adapt that to, you know, the characters in
Absolutely.
your comic?
So I've played this sport now for over a decade, and I think, okay, one of the things I can kind of explain to artistic people why there's such an appeal to this sport is sometimes I could describe it as like LARPing plus sports. Like, it is a very silly sport. Like, I've been on teams where your whole team shows up in a costume, and you play against a very, very serious team who's like really aggro and takes the sport really seriously, and you crush them in your like animal onesies or whatever, or your Star Wars sand people costumes on the beach, whatever it is. So, there's that, and like, I've been playing for a long time. So one summer I was really into Frisbee during one of my off seasons from South Park. I went to a beach national championship tournament. I lost. And also that summer I went to a European tournament, because this is played all over the world, called Paganello. And I remember being at a house of people who like were like frisbee lifers, really hardcore. And I remember talking to this one guy who I really admired. I knew him to be like a very, very good ultimate frisbee player. And we did this game, Two Truths and a Lie, and he was talking, and his lie was, I've won 3 ultimate tournaments. And he's like, no, actually it's a lie because I've only won 1 in my entire career. And I had this epiphany of like, why would you keep doing something over and over again for all these years if you've only won 1 tournament? Like how could you keep dealing with all of that heartbreak and lack of success and still be so love this sport so much that you're willing to travel to Europe for it? And that was kind of what birthed the comic is like. You love something so much and it doesn't love you back, whether it's a person, whether this is the animation industry, you love it, but it doesn't love you back. So I think that's kind of the universal theme of this comic is like when you care about something so much and you love it so much, but like it doesn't love you in the same way. And the story starts with this character, Clint, and that's his whole thing is he's dedicated his life to ultimate frisbee, but he's never won an ultimate tournament. And he gets recruited on this team of underdogs because they see something in him and they're going to win a national championship. He's like, you don't understand, guys. I'm cursed. I never win. You don't want me. And they're like, no, we got this. And then, like, same kind of what you said, drawing from real life is all these other characters are kind of the amalgamation of people I've known throughout my playing career. Like, there's the super aggro jock. We call her Kate Carter, who's like really serious, lifts weights, like really intense. She's like the fire. And then we have this character named Cheese, who's the ice. And her jam is that she's like the silly, like the partier, the one who's doing jello shots on the sideline, and the contrast between those two people who like kind of can't get along with each other because they represent such opposite ends of the spectrum. They're both very good at frisbee, but they, there's the tension between them at all times of, I'm the partier and drinker who shows up to the tournament drunk, but I'm awesome, and the one who's like, I'm doing sprints and I don't drink and I'm keto and Whole30 and, So we have like some kind of interesting character dynamics like that in the comic. We have the old superstar who's retired. We have the old man who's been playing forever. And, I don't know, he's just like, was there from the beginning of the sport. And we have like the youths. We have these 2 young twin characters who are like 18. They're fresh out of high school. They're super enthusiastic about the sport. So it's kind of got all this interesting cast of characters. We have the aggressively heterosexual couple on the team. Because one of the things about Ultimate that's kind of unique from other sports is that it's a co-ed sport. Men and women play on the field at the same time, which is unlike, again, this is why I think will make it different from other sports manga and other comics where, like I love things like Haikyuu and Kuroko's basketball and stuff, but it's generally very male. But Frisbee is a sport where you have these mixed gender teams where people play on the field at the same time. And so you always have those like really, like I said, aggressively heterosexual couple who's just like making out with each other the whole time. And it's kind of fun to have that kind of dynamic. And, oh, your ex is on the other team. And, oh, no, they're your rival. That kind of thing. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's so good. I'd never thought about the co-ed part of it. That's just so good.
I wish that I could do a touchdown dance with my partner. You know what I mean? Like you do a little tango at the
Yeah, it's called a honey pass when you throw it to your partner, and exactly.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like nepotism. Like you chose them. It's favoritism out there.
And I want to emphasize that even though there is I have warning, there's a little bit of heterosexuality in this comic. It is also very queer. Me myself being a queer person, that's really important to me. So there are queer characters, and there's also some queer drama. More than romance, but yeah. So that definitely is in this comic as well. So hopefully there's a little something for everybody in it, and even if you're not a sports fan, you can be in it for the frisbee drama, for the interpersonal drama.
Yeah, dude, sounds so fun. I'm like, you pitched it so well. I'm like,
oh my God.
I want to see these characters.
I'll send you some images.
What?
Yeah.
What was it like? Because I mean, you started off on South Park, and you work on some of these shows that it feels like there's not quite as much action as there might be in a sport comic. How was that for you? like getting into the mindset and switching gears to something where it's like you have a little bit of action, you have a little bit of comedy, everybody is,
Yeah.
in mid action, you have dynamic poses, stuff like that.
Well, I have always loved sports and drawing dynamic sports poses. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was drawing football players and Pittsburgh Steelers, like, from the time I could pick up a yellow crayon to draw their yellow pants. Yeah, like, that came natural to me, but it definitely is pushing me artistically because, like you said, most of my boarding experience is a little bit more sitcom-y and it's more comedy than action. So I've had to pull a lot of reference. Like one of my favorite things to reference is the Young Avengers, Terry McKelvey's Young Avengers. Like I read a lot of comics, so I'm always looking at the dynamic angles they're using for fighting poses. And I'm like, how can I translate this to frisbee and sport? And there's a lot of great sports photography out there too. So I'm like analyzing what makes good sports photography, like, oh, the depth of field, how the background is blurred, or like, like what angles can I achieve that you can't achieve on a camera because you're not on the field. So it definitely, that's one of the things I love about it is how much it's pushing me artistically to think more from an action mindset. And, again, I'm referencing things like Haikyuu and other sports. There's all this great sports manga out there to choose from, but it's a very good point. Yeah. To like, go from like I always am like, can I be more dynamic with this angle because I've come from TV where staging can be a little bit more flat, a little bit more straight on, and how can I what panel best serves the story is another thing. Like, do I want to do this dynamic angle just because I think it's cool, or do I actually think that this angle is telling the best story? And that's kind of my favorite part of it. That's what it's all about. That's what we do. That's our job as visual storytellers, right? Is to like serve the story. A cool drawing is great, but like, what's the thing that's going to tell the best story or make you feel the character's emotion the best?
So I wanted to tell you as a way to connect to
Yes.
you. I have in a storyboard on a show storyboarded frisbee stuff.
No, what? I want to see it.
I have. So there is in one of the Halloween episodes of regular show that I got to write and storyboard on, we were coming up with things that the characters were scared of, and basically the bit is that they land on this planet where anything that they think about that they're scared of manifests and tries to kill them.
Yes.
So what we were writing is that we thought it would be funny if the thing like Skips doesn't want to talk about what he's scared of, and then they pressure him and they're like, what are you scared of? What are you scared of? Why don't you tell us? And then they start manifesting, and you see just like a little bit, and you see like a frisbee come into frame, and he's like, oh no, frisbee freestylers. And there's all and like this guy like comes out of the shadows with a frisbee spinning on his finger, and he's like, bro, go long. And then like all these frisbee bros like are doing like tricks under their legs and spinning the frisbee and like passing it to each other, and he's like, no, and like and they all like start pelting him with frisbees, and he dies.
Oh
dies.
my God, I love it.
But I have boarded frisbee stuff in a show before.
I love it. I need to see this. And to be fair, most ultimate frisbee players are also terrified of freestyle frisbee players because that's a different thing. And I am,
it's a different
so
monster.
scary.
Yeah.
Don't ask.
What's the difference? What's freestyle frisbee? I've never
Sean
heard of
can
it
probably explain it
before.
better than I could.
I'll let you explain it. Oh, okay, yeah. So basically, it's a different form of competition where instead of trying to score goals on opposite sides of the field, and instead of like frisbee golf where you're trying to land it in a net, it's essentially it's either one or two people. I think you can do it in twos, and I think you can do it in just one. But basically, it's like doing tricks up into the air, and it comes back to you, and then you're like catching it and spinning it on your finger, and you're doing like tricks and doing fancy passes to one another in like an improvised, tricky way. And I remember like, okay, so I used to play ultimate frisbee, but it was like parking lot, like like we used to like get a bunch of our cars on a Sunday night, line them up, turn the lights on in like in a Walmart parking lot, and and we played like a pretty street version where I mean, there was some physical stuff. There were, like people would get tackled on accident, and it was a little bit extra, but I remember I I was always like, oh man, like the trick throws are so cool. And so I was always better at doing trick throws than regular
Mm.
throws, which was always so stupid. Like and I used to do like people used to try to figure out different ways to throw it that they thought were fancy,
Yeah.
and they would be like the kickoff person or
Yeah.
whatever, and like they would like call out the name they would call out the name of their move, which
Ooh.
was like super stupid and cheesy. But I had this move that I would do. I've heard people refer to it as like a chicken wing
Ah, the
throw,
chicken wing.
where you're throwing it.
Yeah, I'm very familiar.
And I drew it on here on the most recent page.
Oh, okay.
But basically, I wouldn't just do that. I would spin around 2 times and jump and throw it like
Oh
that,
my god.
and I would go buzzsaw as like,
I love it.
and it was so stupid. But one of the reasons why I have a soft place in my heart for it, even though I don't do it as much anymore, and I'm out of shape. But uh it was one of the things that my friends and I did when other kids were partying a lot. Like I was never
Mm.
part of like a party culture or party lifestyle, and a lot of my friends were straight edge, and
Whoa.
we'd all listen to hardcore music and
You got
whatever.
the
And so
X's on your hands.
on
Yeah.
weekends we would e- I didn't, but I have a lot of friends that did.
Yeah. I remember that.
But we would meet up every weekend, and that's how we hung out. We would play music, we would play ultimate frisbee, and I have a fondness in my heart for it.
I am so impressed by your knowledge of flying disc sports. Like, you're higher than 95% of the population in your explanations. Like, most people, when I say I play Ultimate, they're like, oh, like disc golf. Yeah, that sounds fun. Like, where are the dogs? So I'm extremely impressed by your knowledge. And I wonder if it's too late for me to draw in the buzzsaw into my comic. As a pole play.
Oh,
It's
please.
wild.
Please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
It's so
impressed.
I remember there was somebody on the other team. They had this way of throwing it that I'm not sure what the throw is called, but you can throw it with your
A
thumb
thumber.
like this, where a thumber. But he used to be able to throw it so far,
Yeah.
but he could only do it by putting it to his neck, and he used to call it the violinist, and so that's what
No!
he would yell when he threw it off. And I think that this and it was funny because whenever I would go to like pickup games in LA or elsewhere, like I was like, I think I play this sport a little bit wrong. I think we played in the parking lot, and like there were a few people that knew what they were doing, but we like sort of put some rules on hold. So I always felt like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. But yeah.
Yeah, that is incredible. It sounds like the pickup game I started at in LA, because I didn't play Ultimate until I moved to LA, and I found it was a bunch of artists and animators that played this game in North Hollywood, where it was like, usually Ultimate's played 7-on-7, and they're out of bounds, and it was like 14-on-14. It was just
Mm.
pure chaos of people. It felt like being in one of those like Star Wars battles in the sky, when like all the TIE fighters and all the like ships are just flying at you in different directions, and there's a disc flying over your head, and no one's counting a stall count, and it's just like pure chaos. And then I got into a little bit more serious form of Ultimate, but yeah, you could have a lot of fun with that game. I get it. And you would have fit in
Yeah.
in that
I
game.
remember
You
meeting
would have
up.
fit in right in.
I remember meeting up in the parking lot, and we all used to bring our own frisbee, and we would go on the other side of the parking lot, and we would bring a couple frisbees, and we would all try to hit the stop sign all the way at the other end just to practice our aim.
Yeah.
And we would do that for like 4 or 5 hours, just like trying to throw it across the parking lot and hit a stop sign. And most of us would not hit it. but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's some good memories around Ultimate Frisbee.
Yeah. Didn't know you were gonna plant an ultimate frisbee ally.
But there's a reason why I was recruited.
Yeah.
I didn't even know myself. I just found out right before you came on the show.
I'm so stoked. Usually people gloss right over the frisbee
I love
part,
it.
and he's like, "Yeah, let's talk frisbee. Let me show you the buzzsaw."
I love that. I love
Because-
that so much. I gotta hope that when your copy gets published, I am gonna be looking for that reference. You have to sneak it in there. It's too late. It's recorded. People will
Okay.
come after
I'll-
you.
I'd like to try something real quick because I am not super familiar with the technical names of a lot of these moves. I was wondering if you could say the name of a move, and V and I both try to draw what we think
I'll
that
give
looks
one
like.
for
Oh,
each
yeah,
of
yeah,
you,
yeah.
Okay.
Would you be down, V?
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Sean, you're gonna get the scoober, and V, you're gonna get the hammer.
Oh, wow. Damn, these are like really fun. I love that it's so anime. Like when you think about it, like or like
Yeah.
wrestling. Oh my
I'ma do it.
god. Well, while we draw the frisbee prompts, so for anyone who's listening on Spotify or iTunes, make sure you check out the YouTube video. Then you can see us drawing these like crazy prompts. I'm gonna get you started on some
Okay,
questions.
let's go.
So from our patrons over on the Discord, we have from Brother to Drummer, question, what are your thoughts on a story episode having a happy ending? Bojack kept tearing out my heart, yet I always wanted more, but I vastly prefer a happy resolution to things. Do the characters steer the mood and resolution? So kind of like, it's just your thoughts and philosophy on, happy endings versus, drama.
I think I don't want to speak for Raphael, but that's the whole premise of the show is that, like, it's a sitcom, right? And we're all used to the sitcom ending being, like, super happy, everything works out at the end. The lesson you learned pays off, and everyone smiles and hugs at the end of the episode. And Bojack's whole jam, the show, was flipping that script, right? And, the thing that you thought was going to happen wasn't going to happen. Actually, it turned out horribly for Bojack. And what I like about that show is I think it found a place for, like, the melancholy, like, it allowed you to sit in the sadness of the show in a way that, like, do you really want every single show to be, like, a happy ending or everything to work out? I like the show that when, at the end of an episode, it would hit you so hard, and then the credits by Group Love would come on, and it'd be like, back in the 90s, I was in it, and it would, so, like, I love the contrast of that emotion of, like, sitting in the sadness of whatever you just saw, and then this, like, bubbly, kind of popish song comes on at the end. So I don't think Bojack was ever going to get his truly, truly happy ending. Again, this is all the creator of the show. I think there's a lot of room for emotional nuance. Like, I think we've come a long way in television to go from that sitcom feel-good TV to something that's a little bit more deep and pensive. There's a place for both.
Yeah, totally. I love that. That's a great answer. Because like you said, we have the sitcom formula. It's such a clever thing too. Like the sitcom formula is like it's so embedded in our brains, like kind of taking that and like turning it out inside out or like upside down. It's like really, it's what makes the show so cool. This is just like a kind of like crazy kind of fun question, but I think it's kind of funny. From our patron Joe Benson, do you think Bojack would date Tuca or Bertie, and how long would those relationships last?
I don't think that's who Bojack would date. I think Bertie would be far too anxious to even go near Bojack, whereas Tuca would probably, I think Tuca would use Bojack as like a one night stand and then be out.
Yeah, I agree.
He's too much of a drag. I'm out. He's sad.
And then Bojack would be like calling her and like trying to text her, and she'd just be moving on to the next thing. So it's not whether or not Bojack would date them, it's whether they would date Bojack.
Oh, I love this question from one of our listeners on and previous friend of the show at Magic Bunny Art. What do you like the most about working on adult
Hey, Magic
animated
Bunny
shows?
Art. I, like we've been talking about just in the last question, I like that you can tackle a little bit more deep subject matter. There's a lot of great children's cartoons out there, so I don't say that to belittle them, but like I like that you can get into things like addiction, or like the most recent season of Tuca and Bertie was about like dating an alcoholic, and there's all these trauma and these much more adult deep issues that really resonate with people. And whether it be like the disgusting gross satire of South Park and letting your mind go to some of the most ridiculous disgusting places, or again exploring the depths that I talked about from like The View from Halfway Down. I love the adult themes. And I think adult cartoons are great, and that animation is a beautiful medium to explore those things, and it's important that we have adult animation and not just get pigeonholed as a kids medium.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I feel like especially these shows like Bojack, Tuca and Bertie, like they've really kind of they're like trailblazers into this like kind of like new type of adult animation, I think. Yeah. I'm just gonna give a shout out to at _Jordan Hess. We've kind of covered this question, but I'll just read it anyway. What was it like traveling all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast for your first animation job? Did you move to LA first, or did you wait to be hired before moving? Obviously, second question, we covered it, but I guess the traveling
hey
part.
Jordan, I actually
like?
know Jordan. For me, like being a artsy queer kid who grew up in small town Pennsylvania, moving to LA was like the best thing ever. I immediately felt at home. I like the East Coast, and I love my Pittsburgh roots. I'm so proud of them. I am a terrible towel waving Steelers fan at heart, but I found that you can be that and also like thrive in Los Angeles around so many like just brilliant creative people. You can kind of find whatever type of person that you're looking for, whatever you're into, you can find it in a big city like LA. So whether that be like your weird D&D group to like your like weird BDSM sex ring, to your dreadlock pot smoking hippies down in Venice Beach, to your ultimate frisbee jocks, you can find whatever kind of group of people that you are looking for in Los Angeles. And I love how diverse and eclectic it is. Amazing food. I'm a big fan, and but that's not to say it's better than those other places. It's just different.
Yeah, I love that. Great answer. LA does have everything. Yeah, it's scary to move, but it's also fun.
One of the reasons I didn't go to college. Like I wanted to go to like a Cal Arts or like a USC or one of those places, but I wasn't quite ready to make that move. I felt very lucky that I was able to stay kind of local with Edinburgh, and really just focus on animation before I got into like even for those 2.5 years I wasn't working, I kind of got swept up into the LA of everything. And it's very easy to do that and lose your way. So it's important to stay true to whoever it is that you are if you make the transition to like from like a small East Coast place to like a big city out here. But yeah, I love it. And it's, Vee, you probably have opinions on this too, but it's like, it seems like it's increasingly less essential to move to a big city to work in animation these days with so much being remote. I don't know. I assume you're in LA too, Sean, right?
Yeah.
Right. But, like I know a lot of people who have since left, or people who have worked remotely their entire job. Like my last gig, there were 2 people on my storyboard team or three of my 4 board artists were like not in Los Angeles. Like I had one in New York and like 2 in Portland and then 1 in LA.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
No. I just worked with someone from Spain. But sorry, go.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm really interested to see what for a little bit of like insider knowledge for y'all listening is that this is actually some of the stuff that the guild kind of tries to talk about with the AMPTP, like the kind of like having this be a nationwide union so that anybody can work from anywhere in the States in those LA jobs. So this is something that's like Obviously freelance, if you're freelance, you might not always be union, but you can probably work from anywhere, and it's like a different role, or like for it's just like benefit stuff. But like at the end of the day, you can probably work in animation from anywhere. It just kind of depends on like the kind of status you're gonna get, I think. Yeah. I like this question by at Abby Frischer. How difficult, if at all, did you find the transition from animating to boarding
That's
to
a
directing?
great question, Abby. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I think with animation to boarding, I got very lucky that Bojack, because of the type of show it was, we were boarding in Flash. It was a really, and it's, as I said before, it's such an acting heavy show. Staging is much more simple. It's very sitcom-y. It was very like, sometimes we'd get like one camera angle for like a 2-minute scene or one background, and you'd have to just punch in around that background. So it was a really lucky for me, again, right show for me to transition from animating to storyboarding. It really played to my strengths. And so, one of the things that I had to really remember, because when you're an animator, you're so focused on performance and acting, and I still have to remind myself as a board artist, is staging, clarity, and storytelling come first. Like, you cannot, when you go from being an animator to a board artist, you cannot just, oh, that's a juicy acting beat, I really want to do this pose or whatever. No. Your staging, your composition comes first. Like, stay really loose. Don't even do the acting. Like, it is all thumb. Like, I force myself to thumbnail still on paper when I'm boarding scenes, because I board very small thumbnails, just because I'm like, storytelling, staging, composition, great. Then you can dig into the meatier acting stuff. So that was that transition from animation to boards, and then from boards to directing. I really, really liked it, because I think I was very fortunate to have really incredible directors for ever since I became a board artist. I feel like I have had this cornucopia of amazing directors, and you kind of just like pick and choose from their different styles. Like, I can name like all of them. Again, I mentioned Amy Winfrey, Adam Parton, Stephen Chan. Like, I'm gonna leave someone out and make them feel really bad. Alex Salyer, all of these people, Molly Helms, Erica Perez, God, I could keep going. Samantha Gray, who is also on this podcast. Again, I'm sorry if there's one director that I left out, because you've all been so amazingly influential in like what I was able to pick and choose for my own directing style. And again, that's why I feel like it's so important to do your own projects on the side, because especially if you're working with other people, because then you have to not just do what's in your head, and you're not just doing it, but you have to be able to articulate what you want to other people. And I think it is also helpful that I've worked on such a variety of shows that, I've been able to like kind of, and I've seen, seeing how the South Park writing process works, you see it from the inside. And then like, the scripts from Tuca and Bertie were always so good, and Bojack as well. Then, take all that stuff with you and bring it to your first directing experience, and really try to understand what the showrunner is going for. Like, know what material they're referencing. It's much more big picture, right? Like, you got to know what their influences are, like what they're going for. And then the other big part of it is you are managing a team. You have these people under you, and what you want to do, like, my goal is always like, how can I get the best out of the people? Like, how can, everyone brings different skills to the table as an artist. And it's like, what are their skill set, like, and how can you get the most out of it? What's the scene that's going to give them the best chance of success, based on their life experience, or based on how they draw, or this person's really good at acting, this person's really good at staging, like putting your people in like very strategic positions to succeed, I think, and understanding who they are is, and casting them, like, I'm never going to be a director that like is like, okay, you take the first third of the episode, you take the second third, it's like, no, I think it's really important to cast by scene and by storyline throughout the episode, and and try to give people scenes that they want to work on, that they're going to be passionate about. And I don't know, I think those are all things that are important as a director. And when you're in the first, I'll say one more thing, as I tend to be a little long-winded, but when you're in your meeting with your director to, like, we'd have a pre-thumb and we'd go over it with the showrunner, like, it's, Pete Merriman, I should shout out him as well. He was my supervising director for my first directing gig, which, again, taking it back to meeting Amy Winfrey, right? That's her husband. So all these years later, I am directing, and her husband is my supervising director, and he's really couldn't have been asked for a better supervising director for my first one. But when he always said when you're in a pre-thumb with the showrunner, it's like, how do you start a conversation with them? You don't even have to get right what's on the script, but like it's like getting as much information out of them, like what their intentions are with the script and what they want. So like even if you show them an image of this is what I was thinking for this scene and they're like, no, that's completely wrong, don't take it personally. That's actually great because now you know what they don't want and you can work with them. And it's about like figuring out what, not only the story, like your own creative vision, what you think it should be, but like how they want to tell this story and making sure, because that's going to save you problems later down the road. Is get it wrong in the pre-thumb, so then when the board artist does it, it's like you're already hopefully hitting the mark.
Yeah, that's so great. Like I honestly, that was a thing about working on Captain Fall at Netflix. I learned that was the pipeline from Bojack was so great. Is like we were doing this pre-pitch of the episode. So then, because when you're working with EPs that are writers or come from live action and they're not used to the animation pipeline, you need to give them as much of your plans as early as possible so they can call the shots, because at the end of the day it's their show. So that was so great on Captain Fall. I was able to be like, hey, I grabbed all these pictures from Google Images. Is that what you're imagining for the mansion? And they're like, no, it has to be more like, I don't know, South Hemisphere or something, like
Sure.
Obviously I'm just making this up, but yeah. And that's been just like, so, and I've heard that it's not very common for shows to work that way. I've heard that this is kind of like the Bojack pipeline, which I think I'm so glad to have learned that, because I'm like, oh, why isn't everybody doing this? You can solve so many problems so fast.
It's really vital as a director to have that pre-thumb week. It's so helpful, and I think I attribute that credit to again Pete Merriman for making us a point to do that on our current show, because it's so helpful, because when you're a director, you don't always get a lot of FaceTime with the creators of the show, and you don't get often any FaceTime with the actual writer of your show. So really trying to like pick their brain and show them what you intend to do before you put all the effort into boarding something is so helpful. And I think it really went again in my first directing gig, which is for a show called Praise PD, which you can Google. Hopefully it'll be out. I can't say when it'll be out, but I hope you all will like it. It stars Annie Murphy from Schitt's Creek, and it was a blast to work on. The showrunner is Anna Dresden, who was a writer on SNL, head writer on SNL, and Monica Padrick. And it was really, really fun to work with them. And like trying to really understand their sense of humor and what they found funny. And often their sense of humor would align with mine, which was good. And it was a great first directing experience. And I had a great board team. I feel really, really lucky that was my first. It's always so important to have a supervising director that like wants you to succeed, and I could feel that with Pete the whole way through, like who just wants you to have the best experience, and that makes you want to work hard for them as well. Like you never want to I never wanted to let Pete down ever.
Pete's so great. He was on Captain Fall as well. He was a director, and he's so chill. It's so cool to like be able to talk to him, because he's been through the ringer. I mean, I guess kind of also like you, like he's worked on South Park, so he's just kind of like, it's fine.
We're making cartoons here. This isn't brain surgery. No one's gonna die. Hopefully.
Yeah.
On the flip side of, sorry, go.
I was just gonna keep kind of like giving shout outs for. From the questions. We had a question from Tim Levang, who was asking a little bit about kind of like we kind of went over like how it was like the atmosphere on South Park and stuff like earlier in the episode. So I think we kind of like covered that a little bit. One from @Leech Aihime, which was how was boarding different from Tuca Bertie versus Bojack Horseman, which you kind of like touched on a little bit.
I'll try to keep it short, but like they're obviously stylistically, anyone who's watched both shows, they're very different. Like Bojack, it was more about the acting. It was very sitcom-y staging, and it was very puppeted from a board standpoint. And then Tuca and Bertie was like, it was a little bit more free. It was like you could make really goofy, fun drawings, and it was a lot looser. We didn't rely on puppets nearly as much, which was great. So And you could put so much of your own creativity into it. That was one thing, working for Lisa Hannawalt that was awesome is, having a writer who is also an artist, was that she just gave us so much creative freedom to really put our own jokes in it and really build upon the great visual language and great characters she's already established in the script. And, I'd say this to all the animation writers out there. I don't know if writers listen to this podcast, but a way to make your artists happy is to have them have some, like, creative agency over what you're doing, because you can still have them execute your script faithfully while still, letting we want to bring our talents to your script. We want to make your script better. We want to make your show funnier. We want to, make it be the best possible show it can be. So when you have a showrunner who's like, yeah, that joke that you added was awesome, it feels so good, and it really makes you have artists who really want to work on your show and want to do their best possible job. And even in Bojack too, which was a little bit more tight script wise, I remember all the animal puns and animal gags. Like, that used to be the best part, when you used to get that, like, 2-second establishing shot and you get to put an animal pun in and come with it on your own. Like, Raphael or whoever wouldn't write those in, and it just, the artist would take so much pride in coming up with their, like, silly little animal gags. And that's how you have, like, a team of artists and board artists and directors who, like, love your show and, again, let us feel like part of the creative process.
The difference between the two is, Bojack a little bit tighter, and with Tuca it was much more free flowing.
So I kind of wanted to give a shout out to @spooky_cat, who also had a great question. But since we're running a little long on time, everyone, these episodes are so much fun. And we wish we could have them for 4 hours, but that's the rule. We're just going to have you talk a little bit about creative block, what it feels like for you, and how'd you get over it?
Okay. For me, creative block is at the end of my workday. Sometimes it's really, really hard to want to just jump back into my personal projects, and especially do the creative, like, thumbnailing, like, brain work of creativity versus the, like, oh, this is grunt work, I'm doing line work, or I'm just doing little technical things. So I think for me, to get over creative block, it's like, I try to get out of my head. I go for a walk, I do something else, I work out, I play ultimate frisbee, I try to get away from the computer. I get as far away from the computer as I can. And I feel like actually the best thing, as I'm meandering to my answer, as I usually do, is going for a nice long walk or a bike ride. That's when when my mind is, like, blank, is when, like, the characters from my comic immediately pop into my head, and it's almost like I hear their voices, and I'm like, just my brain gets flooded with, like, oh, this is the story I need to be telling. Oh, I need to think more deeply about this. So I think getting away from the computer, going for a run, going for a bike ride, something that, like, gets my body moving, gets the blood flowing, getting me out of the, like, I'm sitting in front of the computer and I don't know what to draw situation is how I get creative block. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's like, usually that one's a winner, getting, like, moving. Anything that you want to plug while you're on the show?
If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Twitter and Instagram @Megan Praz. More importantly, if you want to stay up to date on my sports graphic novel, it is @Contested Strip. And hopefully we will be better about posting things on social media soon. But yeah, stay tuned. We have the book hopefully coming out this year. We have a goal to finish the art by this summer. And we have lots of tasty, tasty samples that we hope to post over the next couple of months. So thank you guys, too, so much for letting me talk so much about my personal work, because it's something, everyone wants to hear about your, like, South Park and Bojack and Tuca, but I really appreciate you both giving me so much space to talk about, like, my own passion projects. It means a lot.
No, but like, that's what we do, right? We're like creatives, and it's like, there's a reason why, we're in this industry. It's like, we love being creative. So we all have, like, our little thing on the side. And I think that's, like, what's makes us, like, whole, right? Well, that's the end of this creative block. Megan, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me, you two. You're excellent hosts. And I want to mention that as we were wrapping this up, my microphone fell over and I caught it. So this makeshift setup made it all the way to the end, and now it has toppled. So I think
Frisbee
Yes.
reflexes.
Yeah.
see, it's important to play sports and be an artist. So you know you can catch the mic when your podcast mic falls over. So yeah, thank you both so much for having me, and I love the podcast. And yeah, you both are awesome.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter at CRTVBlock, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor, Clemens, for editing the podcast, and Malik for helping us to produce this show.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. And it helps us pay for things like Zoom and Google Drive and all these little knickknacks that are important to getting a podcast rolling. Click the link in the description of this episode. I have been your host, Vee.
And I was Sean, aka Lord Spew. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye!